Welcome back to the Cubbies Crib podcast, powered by Fansided. I am Jordan. With me, as always, my co-partner at Cubbies Crib, Jake Meisner. Jake, it feels like these Thursday episodes are going to be optimistic episodes. We're recording this after the Tampa Bay Rays series, where the Cubs took 2 of 3. There's some bigger news that we do have to get to later in this episode, but the Cubs offense looked really good on Tuesday night, really good on Wednesday night. Javier Assad is Javier Assad. Colin Ray is Colin Ray. Are the Cubs back?
I mean, I definitely texted a few people saying Cubs are back, but it looked closer to the expectation we had coming into the season. Like, this is a lineup that's really deep. That maybe it doesn't have the like A plus guy in it, but plenty of guys capable of driving run production, and the Cubs were getting it pretty consistently. So I think Nico's been basically the most valuable player in baseball so far. Always good to see coming off an extension. Um, you know, love, hate, somewhere in between. However you feel about Ian Happ, he's been above average offensively. Matt Shaw's been solid. It was good to see Ballesteros getting in on things this week in Tampa. So very encouraging. Hopefully it carries forward this weekend. I think I never thought I'd look at a mid-April series against Pittsburgh as a measuring stick, but it kind of feels like one heading into the back half of the month. Obviously, like momentum-wise, the Pirates are flying high right now. I mean, Paul Skeens is Paul Skeens, but a lot of excitement down there right now. So it'll be a good series, but at least we have a little momentum heading into it.
Yeah, before we get into the Pirates series, let's put a bow on the Rays series with our one word descriptions. Of course, at the end of each series, we'll drop one word. We'll say why that's the one word to really recapture what was the series that the Cubs just had. So, Jake, lead us off.
I'm gonna go with reassuring. I think it was just needed for the collective fan base's sanity. They needed a strong showing, um, and I know, we'll talk plenty about the offense, and we already touched on it a little bit. But for me, the series came down to Javier Assad and Colin Ray. There's been a ton of questions and speculation on which way the Cubs would go with Cade Horton done for the year, but you know, Colin Ray did not get the appreciation he deserved last year. I think everyone, it's what have you done for me lately? And obviously, the last start he made was Game 5 of the division series. The Cubs lost that game. We all know that. We don't need to rehash it, but he kept the Cubs season alive after they lost Steele last spring, and they're gonna need him to do it again. Maybe not to the fullest extent because you'll have Javier Assad playing a role too, but those two guys came up huge this week.
Yeah, I'm going to go with relief because on Monday, it certainly felt like the sky was falling. The Cubs had just dropped 2 of 3 to the Cleveland Guardians. They just dropped Monday's game. We were all waiting for bad news on Cade Horton. We're getting to that. Don't worry. That's going to be a big part of tonight's episode. And then Javier Assad took them on for the Cubs on Tuesday. And it was a reminder that, oh, yeah, Javier Assad, he's never going to be the pitcher you want to have in your starting rotation. You don't go into the offseason like, oh, man, I need Javier Assad. But April through October, he's the starting pitcher you need in your rotation. His metrics are always going to suggest there's luck involved, but he gets outs. The bottom line is at some point, some way, luck becomes the expectation for Assad. He gets out. He knows how to pitch to weak contact. So it was relief in the sense that for the next couple of weeks, with Horton out for the year and Matthew Boyd out, hopefully for just the minimal 15 days, the Cubs rotation should be okay with Assad and Ray. And the wild card for the Cubs rotation is that Justin Steele is coming back. When you kind of look at where the Cubs were last April with Justin Steele going out for the season, it's not quite the same. The reason why I say that is something you mentioned last pod is because of Edward Cabrera. That's a big difference in the Cubs rotation this year. So you have Edward Cabrera here. You have Justin Steele coming back. We both agree that Justin Steele is not going to be the top of the rotation pitcher he once was at the start of his return. But if he gets there by October, I think that's another relief for the Cubs because the rotation should be stronger, regardless of any potential external addition there is at the deadline than it was last October against Milwaukee. So for me, the Ray series was relief. Javier Assad looked good. Colin Ray looked good. The offense looked good. We could all breathe today. The Cubs won 2 of 3. They're going into an important series against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Relief. Things aren't exactly a doomsday scenario yet for the Cubs.
Yeah, not yet. It's so easy early in the year, especially when we've talked about it week after week already on the pod. But when the expectations are this high, stumbling out of the gate, having a top rotation piece done for the year after not even two full start, like it's a lot to weather. I've been listening to Anthony Rizzo and David Ross's podcast and their episode with Joe Madden. He talked about like the only thing that he preached early in the year in 2016 when they said it was championship or bust was get out of the gates hot. And it just stood in such a stark contrast to what the Cubs are doing this year. But I think, take 2 out of 3 this weekend, head into next week above 500. I think you'd feel a little better about things. And I think that, like you said, Javier Assad and Colin Ray are going to have an important role to play. But if the offense keeps doing what it did these last few games, they should give those guys enough breathing room to put the Cubs in a position to at least have a chance to win every time they're out.
Yeah, let's get into the news of the week. On Tuesday, there was confirmation that Cade Horton is, in fact, going to miss the full 2026 season and a chunk of the 2027 season if there is baseball. He is going to undergo UCL revision surgery. What type of surgery is going to be dependent on once the doctors get in. There could be an internal brace, which was ultimately the surgery that Justin Steele got last year, or it could be a full fledged Tommy John. If it's Tommy John, one thing to note is this would be Horton's second Tommy John surgery. So the recovery time would be a little bit longer. I think you're looking roughly at a similar blueprint to what Steele had in terms of he won't be ready by opening day, but maybe by the end of May, by the early June, we could pinpoint Horton's return. Now, you know how Cubs Twitter works. The moment there's an injury, everyone puts their GM hats on. Everyone is looking to the free agent market. My guy Marcus Stroman is still a free agent. You think that's a possibility, Jake?
God, I hope not. I
No.
really hope we're not there.
No. All jokes aside, Marcus Stroman won't be coming back to the Cubs. But one name that has been rumored is Lucas Giolito. The Cubs have been loosely connected to Giolito over the past couple of years. He's, of course, been with the Chicago White Sox. He was once previously bad, once previously very good. With the Red Sox last year, he was in between. Some would say he might have been a little bit like Javier Assad. His ERA looked good, but his underlying metrics suggest there's a lot of luck there. Jake, for where the Cubs are in the season, for how much depth they have in their system, do you think a move for Lucas Giolito makes sense for the Cubs?
If you think about how many teams went through the entire offseason needing pitching, nobody signed him. There is a reason for that. There is clearly a disconnect in what his camp is looking for and what he feels he's worth and what the market values in that. And as ghastly as the Horton injury felt and the update on Monday was, Jed Hoyer, as aggressive as he was this winter and this like new leaf he turned over, he is not going to go panic buy on Lucas Giolito. And I think Cubs fans also need to keep in mind if somehow, and again, I think there's so many things that would need to go just right for the Cubs to actually bring in Giolito. He's not game ready. He's not just going to step into the rotation this week. It's going to take him time to build up and get ready and get integrated into the Cubs system. So at that point, you're probably talking May, and Justin Steele's return is right around the corner. So if the Cubs, God forbid, have another season-ending injury in the rotation, sure, maybe. But I personally am rarely a fan of in season free agent signings like this, I think there's just too many variables. I think it's just too hard to get them up to speed in the system and just rolling to project what they're going to be or how they're going to perform. So I'm out on Lucas Giolito.
No, I'm out too. I think had Horton's injury happened at the start of spring training, had Matthew Boyd kind of had this hiccup at the start of spring training, I do think then maybe it's a little bit of a different conversation because you still have the Cubs looking for pitching depth. They're still trying to assemble their pitching plan for 2026. I think maybe then they do think about Lucas Giolito. To your point, the fact that there was so many teams in need of starting pitching this offseason, so many teams still in need of starting pitching, and Giolito is still on the free agent market. I think that's a big tell. And you hit the nail on the head. This isn't someone that's going to sign with the Cubs tomorrow and then pitch at Wrigley on Sunday. This is someone that's going to sign with the Cubs, go to Arizona, have have a bullpen session where he faces live hitters before going on a minor league assignment to just get game ready. And like you said, by then you're getting towards the end of May and you're pinpointing Justin Steele's return. So I don't think the Cubs have to race out, like you said, and sign Giolito. It doesn't make sense. We saw this week that they can get by with Horton and Colin Ray in the rotation. Jed Hoyer's not the type that's going to panic. Do I think he probably has a Rolodex of pitchers he would turn to in the event of in case of an emergency break glass? Sure. I just don't think the Cubs are at that point because they still have enough healthy arms to get them at least until Steele comes back in the rotation.
I mean, the Giolito signing proposals on Twitter are nothing compared to the folks saying that Jed should do whatever it takes to go get Sandy Alcantara right now. He kind of called, that Cubs fans who make those types of proposals, you just don't wrap your mind around the complete lack of leverage the Cubs would have. If Jed called down to Miami and said, "Hey, I want Sandy Alcantara," they're going to say, "Sure, let's do it. I'll take Kevin Alcantara. I'll take Jackson Wiggins. I'll take Jefferson Rojas and throw in Matt Shaw." Like
Yeah.
that type of stuff, just those type of deals are once every blue moon. And like, that's not a lever that the Cubs are going to pull right now. Could they get to the deadline and say, "Hey, we need another rotation piece," and do something that? Sure. We're not even a month into the season. That's just not going to happen, strictly from the sense that Jed would be going in with not even one hand tied behind his back. He'd be going in handcuffed and blindfolded to try to negotiate. And it's just not something that would come together.
Yeah, and it completely ignores the other team in the equation. Not that I'm saying Miami is going to be a full-fledged contender by the end of the season. That being said, they're one of the teams that's kind of caught your eye through the first 2 weeks of the regular season, in part because of Owen Casey, but we don't have to talk about that right now. It's also and he does seem upset in Miami. That being said, I think even a franchise like the Marlins realize, hey, we can't trade our ace this early in the season because the optics of that would just look bad.
Yeah, this isn't MLB The Show when you flip into the settings and force trades on. That's just not how this would work. But it's a nice pipe dream. But if you want Sandy Alcantara in the Cubs rotation in April, go play MLB The Show.
Yeah, let's go to another popular theory that Cubs fans have. It was kind of fueled today with a tweet from Tommy Birch that Jackson Wiggins is not among the Iowa Cubs probables, fueling speculation that, oh my God, are the Cubs accelerating the timeline, bringing Wiggins up to the major league level? Let's slow down. The other part of the tweet included a message from, I think it was Dan Katrovets, that the Cubs are just being mindful of his innings. If you think back to last year when Wiggins was in Double-A, he went months at a time between starts, between appearances. The Cubs, like they were with Cade Horton, like so many people are now trying to criticize them for over-pitching Horton, the Cubs are very mindful with the innings that the pitching prospects have. So, no, Wiggins isn't earmarked for Wrigley Field right now. Do I think maybe by the end of the season there's a path for him to get there? Sure, but in April, no. Jackson Wiggins is not a legitimate option to replace Cade Horton at this moment.
No, your internal options are the names you know. They are Javier Assad, they are Colin Ray, they are cover your ears, Ben Brown, and then as we were talking before the pod, Sahadev Sharma over at the Athletic touched on some other internal options. Kyle Wright, who was a minor league pickup this year. Vince Velasquez is down in the minors too. So the Cubs have enough depth, and we've talked about this a lot. Depth is not something they're lacking. Like it, do they have someone to just plug in and give you Cade Horton level production? No, but no team does. No team just has that in their back pocket as a backup plan. So that's what they're going to do. They're first they're going to go to Ray and Assad, maybe Ben Brown, but they'll try those guys on minor league deals before they go out and rush to overpay on the free agent market or rush a prospect like Jackson Wiggins.
No, yeah, completely agree. Let's turn the page. We're past the initial blow of Cade Horton's injury. We're moving beyond the Tampa Bay Rays series. This Friday, 1:20, Wrigley Field. Seiya Suzuki is making his season debut. Jake, when you look at what the Cubs did this offseason, letting Kyle Tucker walk via free agency, being comfortable to trade Owen Casey to the Miami Marlins, I think in part that's because of what they've seen from Suzuki over the past year. He's really tapped into that power. He had over 30 home runs last year. He was the impact bat that the Cubs thought Tucker would be. Suzuki was that bat in the playoffs. I think this is a big moment for the offense. I think we're going to see a more consistent starting lineup from Craig Counsell where he can deploy his guys truly how he wants 1 to 9. And we've seen the offense tick up over the last 2 games. I think Suzuki's ready to take it to the next level.
Yeah, he's looked really good on his rehab assignment. Checking all the boxes. The Cubs wouldn't have him come back this week if they weren't convinced he was 100%. And to your point, he was an elite power bat last year. I think last year is what Cubs fans expected when the Cubs brought him over from Japan. And he's gotten better every single year he's been here. So the hope is that, if this is his swan song in Chicago, it's his best yet. But there's no doubt this team needs more power. That's the one thing they've lacked. We've finally started to see it in Tampa this week. But Seiya's an impact bat, and I think the consistency in the lineup is huge. I think it affects how opposing pitching staffs attack the Cubs. I'm excited to see him back. I think I think it's enough to just really jumpstart the team and get things back on track. Because I mean, they're going to need him to be a run producer, especially in the back half of this month.
Yeah, with Horton out, you're going to need the offense to win games for you, at least until the deadline when maybe there's an external addition. We saw the offense begin to do that this week. Suzuki's going to take that to a next level. With that, I think there's going to be some reconfiguration on the bench. Jake, it seemed through the first week of the season, Michael Conforto was easily going to be the odd man out once Suzuki came back. He was looking lifeless at the plate. He wasn't really an option in the field. You could still argue he still might not be the strongest of options in the field, but we saw some really good plate appearances from him down in Tampa Bay. Shout out Alex Bregman, who was working with him behind the scenes. And I think it's confirmation that at least for the next few weeks, the Cubs are going to let the Conforto experiment continue. He hits from the left side of the plate, which you mentioned last episode is a big plus for him. So with Conforto safe, who do you think is going to be the odd man out when Suzuki's activated tomorrow?
I think Scott Kingery's time on the island has come to an end. 2 games he's been in, no plate appearances. Everything Kingery can do defensively, Matt Shaw can do that and more, and produce offensively. So for me, Kingery's the clear choice. He's got to go. I think you definitely want to give Conforto a little more runway. I think you also want to keep him in your pocket in case Seiya comes back and maybe isn't playing 5-6 days a week, just as he gets his legs under him and continues to rebuild that strength. It's nice to have a guy you can turn to like Conforto, especially if the matchups are favorable. If you need to give Bregman a blow, you need to give Nico a blow, however that all shakes out. Like it's nice to have Shaw there, not have to force him into outfield plate appearances because the three main, Cubs veteran infielders want to play every day. So I think it gives them more routes to get Matt Shaw every day at bats, and I just don't think Scott Kingery's a value add at this point.
Yeah, put Scott Kingery on one side of the coin, put Dylan Carlson on the other side of the coin, flip it, whatever side that faces you tomorrow, that's the odd man out. If it's Kingery, like you said, Shaw's perfectly capable of stepping in, playing all over the infield. She's also perfectly capable of being the pinch runner late in games. You wouldn't lose sleep. Even if it's Dylan Carlson, the argument there is that he could play center field, but truly, I think PCA is of the mode of the starting infield in that he doesn't want to take a day off. And when he does take a day off, as much as I hate it, I think the Cubs can get by with Suzuki in a one game in center field and just move on. They also have Kevin Alcantara in AAA Iowa. He's lighting it up, so I'm not necessarily worried that the Cubs won't have, by definition, a backup center fielder on the roster. But yeah, whether it's Kingery, Carlson, I think this one feels a little bit obvious. I think the biggest takeaway from the week is that Conforto probably brought himself a little bit longer with the Cubs, just given how good he's looked at the plate.
Yeah, it was a like you said, shout out Alex Bregman. This is one of those behind the scenes things that we heard about from his time in Houston, from his time in Boston, was that he wasn't just going to bring you value on the field. He was going to bring it in a lot of different ways behind the scenes. Obviously, being that veteran leader, teaching young players how to win, how to go from being a contender to a winner. That's all important. But being able to identify things in other players and offer his advice and insights, hopefully, it leads to more good things for Michael Conforto.
Yeah, moving on, kind of putting a bow on the Pirate series and just opening up our miscellaneous drawer before the end of the episode. I wanted to touch on something the Pirates did this week. Of course, last week they promoted Connor Griffin. This week they signed him to that long rumored extension. He gets a 9-year deal worth $140 million. Escalators take it up to potentially $150 million. This dude very much looks to be the next face of Pittsburgh, regardless of what happens with Paul Skeens in his future. It seems Griffin is taking the mantle, hoisting the cone, as they say in Pittsburgh. Jake, are the Pirates actually behaving like a baseball franchise?
They are, and I low key. It's not even low key. I love it. I think this is awesome. I think it's good for baseball. I think that fan base deserves it. I think every fan base deserves an ownership group that actually spends and builds the infrastructure to develop talent like Connor Griffin, like Paul Skeens. That's baseball is better when there are more competitive teams. That being said, the next decade is going to be rough in the NL Central. A lot of young talent coming. But yeah, Connor Griffin looks to be the real deal. That's not to say he's going to immediately hit the ground running. Like there's probably going to be speed bumps as there are with 99% of young players. I think it's worth remembering he's only 19. But he seems to have a really good head on his shoulders. He's excited to be the face of the franchise. Yeah, if you're talking about a team that's kind of riding high on the vibes, the Griffin extension, they're playing decently well here early in April. They got new city connects today. Like the vibes are good in the Steel City. So it'll be exciting and hopefully not terrible to get our first look at him in person this weekend at Wrigley. But hats off to Pittsburgh. I think it's awesome. I think it's long overdue. It's just good to see a bottom feeder team actually try.
Yes, me either there. Completely agree. Connor Griffin should be a uplift for the Pirates franchise. They've done a lot of things right really since the offseason started. It's cool to see the Pirates actually try because PNC is such a great park. All of their fans are motivated. One of the best Cubs playoff series was actually 2015 against the Pirates, playing meaningful games in PNC. That was so much fun to see. Yes, it could drive my anxiety crazy in August and September, but the Pirates being good is ultimately good for baseball. Any team being good is ultimately good for baseball. You want to see competition across the board. So, very excited to see what happens between the Cubs and Pirates this weekend. I think it's a good measuring test for both teams and just a good litmus test for the National League Central as a whole. Jake, I wanted to end this podcast talking about the Matt Shaw and right field experiment, partially because I think we have an early answer who's going to replace one of Ian Happ or Seiya Suzuki in the outfield next season. I think it's going to be Matt Shaw. Uh, I've been critical of Matt Shaw for much of the past year. I think there's just a lot of work to go in with his offensive approach. When I saw him in Japan last season, that's really the first extended look I had at him. And even the most casual baseball viewer knew that his stance wasn't going to be successful. There's been plenty of tweaks to his approach. Even in the playoffs last year, it seemed like he needed to go through another tweak. And to his credit, every time he's been faced with one of those moments, he's answered the bell. What was impressive with me over the past 2 weeks is just how hard he drove the ball. He wasn't seeing results right away, but over the past week, I was really impressed. He had 2 home runs. His weighted runs created plus is up to 108 on the season. And yes, there's still some work to do for him in the outfield, but as was the case with third base, I think if you just give him more time, I think he's going to become an above average fielder in the outfielder. Jake, what was your early review of Matt Shaw, the outfielder?
I think we touched on it last time. I tried to take his defensive performance in those first couple series with a grain of salt because the conditions were so bad, both in Cleveland and at Wrigley. So, and offensively, if he's above average, pair that with the fact that he can spell infielders and outfielders, like that's incredibly valuable. And I think if you're still questioning that, like just look to the other side of the room with the Cade Horton injury. Like having those guys that can step in and step up when needed is so important. And it can be the difference between heading into a year with playoff expectations and achieving that goal and falling short. Like you have to have that next man up. Shaw has like you said, he's shown the ability to make these tweaks, make these adjustments, do whatever's asked of him, and do it, fairly well. So I think he's one of the most important players on the roster right now.
No, firmly agree. It's because of his versatility. To kind of close the loop on an earlier conversation, to just close the loop on something you said, if it gets to October and God forbid there's an injury to Swanson, Horn, or Bregman, or even one of the outfielders, would you rather have Scott Kingery or Matt Shaw in your starting lineup? That's a very easy answer. You know the answer 10 times out of
If
10.
if, if
It's
your
Matt.
if your answer is Scott Kingery, please get help.
Yeah, it's Matt Shaw. And I think we're just seeing why even after the Alex Bregman signing, the Cubs were never eager to trade Matt Shaw. Sure, they listen. As a good front office, you have to listen. You have to see if there's a team out there that's going to just simply give you that Godfather type offer. But short of that happening, I think Shaw has still a very high ceiling with the Cubs, and I think he's going to figure his way into the starting lineup, whether that's spelling with Moises Ballesteros as a DH this season or just next season becoming a starting outfielder. I very much think the arrow is headed in the right direction with Matt Shaw. And I think what we've seen over the last 2 weeks proves that.
Yeah, 100%.
And
I'm excited. I'd say I'm really excited to see. We've seen these like little runs, right, where it's like, oh man, Matt Shaw is turning the corner, and then it's up and down
yeah,
and up and down and up and down. Like if he can show that, hey, this is sustainable now, that's such a huge boost for the Cubs.
yeah, I was taking a peek as his baseball savant page today before the podcast. I just want to make sure that my eyes were actually seeing what they were. And yeah, he's dripping red in just about every offensive category. So you love to see it. We would love to see the Cubs take 2 of 3 from the Pirates this weekend and come back to a Monday episode where we have positive vibes and not the sky falling. So hopefully the Cubs can take care of business. Jake, let's get a final prediction. How many games are the Cubs going to win this weekend?
Assuming they actually play all three, the forecast is a little spotty. I
Looking
think,
dicey.
yeah, I think they'll get two. I think they'll get two this weekend. I think the return of Seiya is big. I think the starting rotation keeps doing its thing, and I think as we get further into April, and into May, I think, like we've talked about before, the bullpen kind of settles out a little bit. People have their roles; they start finding more success. So I think the deeper we get into April, the more good you're going to see, and I think it starts this weekend against the Pirates.
Yeah, I'm going with 2 as well. Um, really just doubling up on everything you said. On top of that, there's gonna be some warmer temperatures at Wrigley this weekend. I think that's a big plus for the offense. I think that's why we kinda saw them break out in Tampa Bay. They were in a controlled environment. They didn't have to deal with 25-degree weather and potential chance of snow or hail. As the weather gets warmer, the Cubs offense will go. I think we see signs of that this weekend with Seiya coming back. Cubs are gonna take 2 or 3. We'll be back with you on Monday night talking about the good vibes from that series and anything else that happened. For now, I'm Jordan. That's Jake. Talk to you soon.